Hello and welcome to Property Mastermind Podcast, episode 150. Yay, we got there. What a milestone. Today, have money to invest and don't know where to put it. This episode will be awesome. We're going to discuss two things you need to do before investing in a project. Plus, we have a new segment at the end where we'll be answering a question from one of our listeners. So you know who you are. Your question's been sent in. It is a great question. Stick around. This is episode 150. Hey, Bob, 150.
Got there.
We got there.
Wow. 50 was a big milestone, I remember.
It was. And so
And
was
100.
100. I think we did a recollection of all the podcasts.
Yeah, that's right. We did. Yeah.
And we talked about doing
150.
that. But then we had a discussion when you listen to a podcast and it doesn't address what's in the title and you don't know what you're going to get. And a lot of people don't like that, apparently.
Okay.
So today, your throat sounds like mine.
I know. I'm a little bit raspy myself. I hope you haven't given me something.
Oh, my goodness. I've been battling something since my trip to New Zealand. But anyway, I don't know what it is. Well, maybe we do. Who knows? Hopefully it goes away soon. But today we're talking have money to invest but don't know where to put it? Question mark. We're going to talk about property development investing and the things you need to do before you just jump in and do an investment. So before we get into that, Bob, last week I started with that new question. Instead of a tip, my question is
I think I had Alexander the Great. You asked me who I wanted to go
you-
to dinner with or
yes,
something.
who you would have for dinner, and they had to be someone who's no longer here. Who would you have for dinner? And remember, you
No longer here.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wonder what Jesus is up to.
Well,
Could be interesting. What about people that are alive?
okay, you can have someone who's alive.
How about your mother? Considering she'll be here any day soon.
Was that because I chose your mother last week?
Yeah, it could be. Yeah,
Okay.
getting even.
Okay.
Your mother's good to have dinner with, though.
Yeah, well, she'll be here for a week. So.
Lady's got some stories.
She has got some stories. She's got some property development stories too.
Yeah.
And a few reno stories. Yeah.
Okay.
And a lot of farming stories. Anyway, okay. You've copped out. You haven't given me an answer. You've just taken the easy one and you've moved on. Okay, well, we'll move on, Bob. That's fine. Today
I think a Scandinavian, because that is my ancestry.
Oh, okay.
Viking. Who we got? I'm trying to think of a famous Viking from the Viking series. But
what was that? Ragnar?
Oh, yeah, that'll do.
Ragnar,
or whatever his name was.
That's his name, Ragnar, you know. Hey, we're giving away the book as well, The Property Millionaires Exposed, this week going to April Higgins.
Hey.
There you go, April. This is probably, not this one for you, I think is already in the post, I would hope. Ooh. And great to chat to you this week and look forward to catching up with you again. All right, so we're talking about you know what April said? She said she enjoyed, we'll go back to it, she enjoyed hearing about the blueprint, the easy step-by-step process of property development. And that's what property development is, Bob. Yeah. It's just a process that you follow and there are lots of little steps inside each big step.
Yeah.
And that's it, really.
Lots of steps. Don't miss them.
Yeah.
Don't get them mixed up. Don't miss steps.
But, and do them in a...
It's a sequence. It's an orderly sequence.
I was going to say sequential. There you go.
You got it.
Bob, we are talking property development and investing for a few reasons. One, because we have our joint ventures workshop coming up, and it's a 2-day creative strategy workshop where Bob and all of us actually unpack a lot around how to do joint ventures, at the many different types. They are actually creative strategies. Joint ventures is actually one of them, but that gets lumbered into that. So because people know it is that, we're just using that terminology.
Talk about syndicates, capital raising, using investors' funds to do developments.
Yeah. So it's a win-win situation. So just for the average punter, that's a word. It's a word I don't even enjoy, really. Yeah. But for the average Joanne blogs out there, Joe works for both, there are 2 steps before investing in a project, really. And I've got some notes here, so I'm looking at those.
Oh, have you? Okay. Yes. Well, you're lucky you've got notes.
I wanted to have some sort of pathway on this one, Bob. So you need to start by, first of all, clarifying your financial goals. Clarify what it is that you want, and you just decide on what the objectives are, and then just assess your personal risk tolerance.
Yeah.
So that's step one.
Okay.
So the goals, like people have long-term and short-term goals, Bob.
Yeah.
When it comes to investing money in property development, if we're looking at somebody thinking about their goals, what's the question they should ask themselves?
Well, why am I doing it? What outcome do I want? And most people want to make money. Like, if you want to just generalize, people want a good return on their money. So, and they want to make more money. They want their money working for them.
Yeah.
And putting money in the bank and getting 5% with the current inflation rate, the fact that you've got to pay tax on your earnings, on your interest, isn't really getting you far. So everybody's looking for a better way of making money passively, if you like, and you've got to get a higher return. So how are you going to do that? Usually you've got this risk matrix where the higher return, the higher the risk. And to some extent that's true, because that's how you value risk with a return. And so with property development, I mean, that's what are your goals? Well, the goals are to make money, and remembering that it's probably a 2 year, just on average, not a large project, but could be a 2 year term where your money's out there working hard for you, hopefully, in a project. And there's so many different ways that people can invest in a property development project, but ultimately it's to build wealth passively,
Mm.
not actively like a developer does. So as developers, we make money from property developments, but we're active, we're working, we're managing the project, we're doing all that. The investor takes the back seat, if you like, and so their money is made more passively with the developer doing the work, and that's the trade-off. In a joint venture, that the trade-off is that the investor puts the funds in, the developer does the work, and they both make money. The investor either gets an interest rate return or they get a chunk of the profit, depending on how the thing's structured. So goals are simple. Making passive money is really the goal of the investor. You mentioned risk, and look,
But before we jump into risk,
yeah,
though, often people, like you say, they want their money to make money. They don't know how to do a property development, and they realize that there is great money in it. You did an interview this week with some mentoring students of ours,
yep,
and I listened to it, and the words were, I don't think there's anything else out there that makes money like this, because it's tangible, it exists, it's not something that doesn't exist, and it's something that's a human need. So there are so
mm,
many things that make it possible. I do think that when we talk about somebody's goals, often it might mean that they are, depending on the time of their life, sometimes they are looking
yeah,
for bigger chunks of money so they can own their home without debt. Sometimes people are looking further into the future, so they've got their money coming in and it's giving them an income. I think that when we look at somebody's goals, it depends on their age as to
mm,
what their initial goal will be, and often as they get older, their goals change over time. Would you agree with that? That's what happens with money.
yeah, you're right. And the investor could even be using a self-managed super fund, for instance. So
Yes.
they're building up super for the retirement fund.
Yeah. And I often, that's, my role in this business is a lot of capital raising. So a lot of conversations with people who have money. And it's interesting to hear what people are after. Some people, I just want short term. Some they're looking for a bigger return. Some want faster.
Mm,
Some want slower. Some want consistent. It's very different what people are after. So I think that when it comes to your goal, you might not realize that you have one, but if I was to ask you a question, be that, okay, your money's going to be out for 2 years and your return on investment, your ROI, or what you will get back is likely to be this, you will have a figure in your head that you want that to be. And that is your goal, really, isn't it, Bob?
yeah, yeah. And based on that might be the type of deal that they go into, or the structure of the so-called joint venture, which could be a million different things,
Mm.
whether they're just purely an investor on an interest rate return, or whether they're what we often call an equity partner, where they're part of the project and therefore they're in there for profit share.
And this might sound to the listener right now, if you're new to property development, it might sound quite scary. I kid you not, most people are using a creative strategy in some way. It would, how many would you say in our community use creative strategies?
Oh, 2/3, 3/4.
Yeah. So it's pretty standard, and that's
Yeah.
everyday people looking for or working with. I say when we say using other people's money, I don't like the word using
No.
because it sounds negative, and it's not, because it's such a win-win for people. If you have a great investment opportunity and it works for you, oh my goodness, it's such. I've had great investments, which is,
Mm.
and they had fabulous returns,
Yeah.
and made great friends on the journey. Hello, I know one of you is listening. So it's a great experience to be both the developer and the investor. Yeah. Okay, Bob. So it's funny because you brought up risk tolerance, and
Mm.
that was something else that really needs to be understood. So when you talk about people, or when we talk about people wanting to be investors, let's talk about risk tolerance, because crikey, I have these people do my head in. If they have a very low, is it, what are we low? It's the other way around. So if they have a low risk tolerance, which means they don't like risk,
Mm.
and we talk about this so often, don't we? Because what is risk? It's everywhere we go, all day, every
Yeah.
day.
Yep. Yep.
But for some reason, property development gets
What's investment risk? I mean, we take all sorts of risks, like you say. Driving our car is a very risky thing, and we can't even control. We control our car, but we can't control the other car that runs into us.
exactly.
So risks all around us. We need to understand what the risk is. What can we do to mitigate the risk?
Mm.
We're talking about financial risk here, I guess. We're talking about money, the potential of losing money as well as making money,
Mm.
and so, as you say, people have different tolerances. There's people who really should only put their money in the Commonwealth Bank,
Yeah.
and go to sleep, forget about it.
Mm. Is
And
that called set and forget?
well, yeah, I mean, people with a low risk tolerance,
Yeah.
otherwise they're going to be awake at night worrying about things they shouldn't be worrying about.
Mm.
So yeah, risk tolerance.
Do you know when we talked recently about this? We knew of a family who had kids with different risk
That's right. Yeah.
tolerances, and these kids are older now, and it was quite interesting because of it was a larger family, but two of them you knew quite well, and you were telling me of them, and the male had a very low risk tolerance,
Yeah.
and he was not into doing investing, and yet his sister had a high risk tolerance, and often you'd think it'd be the other way around, wouldn't you?
Yeah, you would.
So Bob, where does that come from? Because you knew the parents.
Yeah.
So what creates
Well,
the
they had the
different?
same parents and their siblings.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I could go back to possibly one of your skills is personality profiling. Is it a personality? I'm asking you now.
Because I would say yes, I would say a little bit it is. I would say if you're a high C, which I call the conductor, they're the person that are all about the detail, and for them things have to be perfect. So if you are high in that and under some sort of pressure, then you would be less likely to
Yeah, I can
take a
see
risk.
that.
And if you're a captain, going for it, forward thinking,
Mm.
big visionary person,
Yeah,
uh,
strategically planning it.
yeah,
Boom, that's
going
it.
for
That's
it.
what we're doing.
And then when you look at those people that do they fit those profiles? Yep, they do. Yeah. But Bob, what causes that? What, apart from, do you think there's more than just nature and nurture there, or is it because, has anyone had bad experiences? Because we do hear of the bad experiences, and they're not all the time, but we do hear of them.
Well, occasionally, yeah, and that can make you shy then to do anything else.
Yeah,
It could be past experiences. Look, it could be parents,
anything.
friends. Like there's a lot of influences when you think about it. And
Like, while we're on those influences,
yep.
here's some.
Mm.
And let's talk about a low risk profile person, or someone who has just average, and they go to an accountant that has a low
Oh,
risk
yeah.
profile. Accountants will kill deals always.
I've seen them kill so many deals.
Oh my God, and they've been good ones. They hold back their clients.
I love it. Some of my friends are accountants. They're great historians, but they're not always good at futuristic things or that. But I think you've got to do your due diligence.
Yes.
Haven't you?
Yeah, you do.
On any investment.
I remember a while ago somebody spoke to us, and there'd been a young guy offering 50%, offering a 50% return on second mortgage security, wasn't it? Yeah, it was second mortgage, and she'd invested everything she had,
Mm.
and she'd lost everything. But that's the thing, that you've got to do your due diligence. If somebody pops out of nowhere and
Offering
they're
50%.
25 years old and they've got, driving around in a Maserati and photos of themselves by a plane.
That's owned by the finance company.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that can happen. And that's, buyer beware. Do your due diligence.
So how do you do your try to say that one. How do you do due diligence these days to find out about your property investment person?
So are we talking
Partner.
about development, or are we?
Yeah, sorry. I mean property develop. If you were going
Yeah,
to invest in a property development, how do you do due diligence on the person?
on the person themselves.
Yeah. Say
Well,
I was
well,
after some money and you were going to invest with me. How would you do due diligence on me?
well, I'd like to know the experience of the person.
Mhm.
How many projects have you done? How
Mhm.
many you've done with investors? I'd like to talk to some of those investors, and ideally some current ones and some past ones. And well, I mean, you can even jump on and Google people. I mean, it's hard. It's pretty hard to hide these days,
Mm.
isn't it? But of course, somebody could be on their way to having a problem, so they're not necessarily showing up on online at all. But I think just referrals as well.
Yeah.
Referrals, lengthen the market, list a project, show me what you've done.
Yeah.
That's important. Or if you haven't done many projects, is there somebody who's going to be working with you? Some experienced, an experienced advisor, project manager, whatever.
Yeah.
We all had to start off. I mean, my first two projects were creative strategies.
Mm.
So often we have to start off with no experience or little experience. And then we have to then convince investors that it's a wise thing to do. And how do we do that? So
Yeah. Actually just said them a project advisor. But what about if you use a project manager? Would that be just as good or not really?
well, that's important. It's who's operating and managing the project on a day by day basis. So
Mhm.
yeah, we know we can have it. You can have a developer who engages a project manager to do all the work,
Mm.
and they're only a developer in the extent that the land might be in their name and they borrowed the funds, but all the work's done by somebody else. Generally, that's a larger project when you incorporated a project manager in there. Often on smaller projects, you just can't afford to run a project manager. The developer is the project manager,
Yeah.
and that's the case a lot on smaller projects, and often they're the ones that people invest in. So it's the developer who's doing the management.
Okay. So the last question that people should ask, and we have talked about this numerous times, is what the return is,
Yeah,
because there are things that you need to first of all understand about yourself, like we said, the goals that you've got, then what your risk profile is, and does it match? And then if you are nervous about investing in property development, then have a look at why. Because if you want to make money and you aren't going to do it yourself, and you want to use property development, well, then that is your road.
mm.
So do the due diligence on your developer, and then how is if they are new to it, project manager, project advisor, make sure they've got someone like yourself. And it wasn't
Yeah.
meant to be an advert, but it's not. It could be. There are plenty of other people that have a
Mm.
go. So as I said, the return is the last thing you ask, Bob.
Yeah.
You
It's
know
often the first thing people look for, but it's
it is.
one of the last things you should worry about.
And probably one of the things that we'll definitely be unpacking at the joint venture workshop will be how you put them together, because that's a
Mm.
question people often ask. How much do I want? And then how much do I offer the other person? Say you've put no money in, what's your share? That's
Mm.
often a big one, isn't it? The breakdowns.
Yeah.
It's often a big question, the breakdowns, because that's one of the important things, how it gets broken down, and the structures. They're two things that are vital when it
Mm.
comes to putting together any sort of creative strategy, isn't it?
It is. That's what we'll be talking a lot about. So, looking at it from an investor's point of view,
Mhm.
we've often seen investors, the first thing they want to know is, let's say they're loaning money to a developer. So it's a loan situation. They're getting an interest rate return for their funds. First thing they say is, how much interest are you going to pay me? They ask the developer. That should be there's about 4 or 5 questions you need to ask before that. Well, what about the developer? We just talked about the experience of the developer. Would that have any effect on the interest rate? If it was somebody's first project, they haven't done one before,
Yep.
they're not using a project manager, they're
Sure
doing it
would.
themselves, or versus someone who's done 50 projects successfully, there's a risk there. There's a higher risk with the inexperienced one. You want a higher interest rate.
Yep.
So let's ask about that. What about the security? That's a big one a lot of people forget to ask. Okay, what security do I get for my money? Is there no security? Is it unsecured money? Is it a second mortgage? Is it a registered or an unregistered second mortgage? Is there a caveat or no caveat? Is there a personal guarantees, director's guarantees? There's just a few things there that have to do with the security. And
they're all great questions, and
yeah.
they're all answerable. You just need to really
But
understand.
all those things are going to dictate the interest rate.
Yeah.
The
terms of agreement.
The weaker the security, the higher the interest rate you have to get.
Yeah.
And there's more to it than that as well. You could even say, well, if it's a second mortgage security, what about the first mortgage? What's the loan to value ratio? If the loan to value ratio on the first mortgage was 80%, there's not a lot left for the second mortgage security. But if it was only 50%, then there's a lot left. So just the loan to value ratio on the first mortgage has a lot of effect on the second mortgage.
There's probably a little bit of a tip there that people don't realise. I would say that would be
plenty.
Yeah, most people
don't ask those questions normally. They don't even understand it. That's why we'll be looking at at the joint venture 2 days in July. We're looking at it not only from the developer's point of view, but also from the investor's point of view, because there'll be investors and developers there as well. And you need to understand this, whichever side of the fence you're on.
Because it's a great fence to be on.
Well, not on it. You want to be one on one side or the other.
So there's some great tips, Bob. What is something else? Well, the next step in a joint venture is the information memorandum.
Yeah, the information memorandum, particularly if it's a situation where investors are loaning money to the development, they're getting an interest rate return. It's really a capital raising. First question, is it legal? Because there's legal ways of raising capital and illegal ways of raising capital. So it'd be good to know that the person that's raising the funds is doing it, within the law. But an information memorandum is important.
We call them IMs.
IM is a short term, information memorandum. So the detail that's in that is
and there's
important.
That fine line, isn't there, for the developer, because they want to give the investor the information, but they need to be able to trust that the investor isn't just going to take that information. And that's what you do find when you are capital raising, which is what I do, is a lot of the time people just want to read the IM to find out the information. And so, you get a black tick against your name, though, in my book, that stop taking your calls, your little X there, because you find out that those people do exist. But a good information memorandum needs to have, it takes a bit of work putting one together. It needs to have about the people, it needs to have about the project, it needs to have about the area, why it's good. There's a lot that goes into an information memorandum. It's not just a pretty picture of here's this and it's going to make this much money. It's way more to it, because it's got to tell the story. It tells the story of why the project is viable and why you would want to invest in it.
Yeah, exactly. And look, it might be just that you need one single investor. So it'll be a short form information memorandum, as opposed to if you're looking for multiple investors, which is really what a capital raising is. And, within the legal bounds, it'll be a heftier document, as it has to be. But yeah, a good looking information memorandum, it needs to look good. It needs to look professional.
Yeah.
And of course, the developer who's, shall we say, pitching for funds, they need to look the goods. They need to look professional, and having a good information memorandum is all part of it.
And they're not difficult to make. It's just a document. I know you've recently got putting one together. You're tending to put yours, because ours can be quite extensive, and big, depending on the project. So the bigger the project, the bigger the information memorandum. And you'll generally put together almost like an A4 document. But most of the people that I work with, and here's a wee tip for you, just make them in either Canva or you make them in PowerPoint and you save them as a PDF. They come
Yeah.
out, they look fabulous. You can make them quite pretty and colourful. You can put your own branding on them. That way, you can either email it to someone, turn up with your iPad and flick through and show them. And they are very professional and they're not difficult to do. You don't necessarily have to print them. And if anyone's got an IM and they want me to have a look at it, you feel free to shoot it through and I can give you through. I said through then. So I can give you some tips as we create them all the time. But it's about, you're right, Bob, being professional and having the right amount of information on there. So it's not everything until you're down to the nuts and bolts. You almost have two, don't you? You give sort of
It could be a simple one pager initially, just with bullet points on
yeah,
it to gauge the interest of the individual.
yeah,
And then and then you have a conversation with that person to make sure they're
yes,
genuine, that they do have funds, that they're ready, willing, and able if they get to make the decision. And then you might put a more comprehensive one. It could be if it's a simple project, you're just looking for an investor, it could be probably about an 8-10 page
yep.
information memorandum. The ones we put together for multiple investors, proper capital raising,
It's about 25,
yeah,
I
probably
think, the one I saw.
25 to 30 pages.
The one I looked at today. Well, I was trying to number the pages, but you made a good point there, Bob. You talk to them first, and I don't send out an information memorandum until I've spoken to somebody because it's just it's ridiculous otherwise. So I will, if someone wants to chat to me, maybe I'll offer an opportunity, and then people say yes, I'm interested. Great, let's just have a chat. For two things, I need to know that one, they've got funds, how those funds are coming. Are they cash? Is it a line of credit? Is it self-managed super fund? Like what sort of product they have, their money, and then when it's available, because sometimes they say, oh yeah, I'm just setting up my self-managed super fund, and that could take up to 6 to 8 weeks sometimes.
Could do, yeah.
Or yeah, I've just got to wait for my money to come back from here, or we're selling a house, or I've got these often stories that go with it and they have every intention. But with that conversation, I'll often say, oh, that's fine, because I will, I can just touch base if we have something else come up. And if it doesn't work, because it's also a timing thing. It's like sliding doors. It's like meeting somebody in a relationship. It's that you just bump into them at the right time. So it is a timing thing when it comes to investors. And yeah, as I say that as a relationship, I remember we had mentoring students, the pivots. Hey, and I know they listen. Hey, Craig and Tia, and they use investors as well. Well, not use. They have investors for their projects too, but Craig, we talked about how initially when I first started working with them a while back, we talked about when you meet an investor, it's like dating. You have to like get to know them and make sure that everyone's on the same page and we're happy for this to all go ahead. And then you ask them to marry you. You don't just jump straight and say, how much money you got and do you want to invest with me? Because they don't know you and you have to create that relationship. And you really do, don't you? You have to trust people.
Yeah. No, like and trust.
Yeah. So the information memorandum will have like a lot of research in the area and all sorts of stuff in it.
Yeah, feasibility, the numbers, how it works. Yeah. What the structure that you're proposing, how much you're looking for, how you're going to pay, when you're going to pay, how much you're going to pay.
And all that business.
And all that stuff.
And all that business. So, Bob, before we move on to our question from our listener, which is our new segment that we're putting in.
The unknown question.
Yes. We'll just recap what we've covered. We've got a joint ventures workshop coming up on the 26th and 27th of July. Early bird tickets are out now. So if you want to come along to that, get your ticket. It's going to be an amazing event. We've got some amazing guest speakers and you will learn so much about how to put together deals, about creative strategies, about joint ventures, and what you need to know to get into the property development, investment, or money investing space. Or if you have money and you want to learn about how you can invest it, a great opportunity for you too. That's one thing. But we also just talked about the things you need to know. Decide on what your goal is, what you would like to achieve with your money. Look at your risk profile and see what you're comfortable with doing. Do you do diligence on the people that you're investing with? And what was the other one in there, Bob?
Information memorandum is the last thing we talked about from a developer's point of view.
Yeah, I think that was everything we covered in there. And yeah, and just the questions to ask and in the right order. So, Bob, we're up to the new segment.
Yeah.
And this
What's
is
this
where
about?
we have a listener who sent a question in, and I would like to play it for you.
Thank you.
It came in by voice recording, and you can answer it. It's a long one.
Okay.
Yeah, are you
Long
ready?
question.
Yeah, it was reasonably long. It's a bit of a gnarly one. I think you'll love it.
Thanks.
It's
I don't even know what
it's
it
a
is.
Bob question. Here you go.
Put me on the spot.
Hi, Bob and Hilary. My name's Jane, big fan of the podcast. So, I had a quick question for you. How do I begin estimating the cost for underground car parking? Should I conduct soil testing initially to determine the type of composition, rock, sand, clay, for example? And what considerations are involved in terms of concrete and excavation? So, my current development can accommodate 8 townhouses, but if I utilise affordable housing codes and opt for underground parking with strata titles, I could potentially nearly double that to 15 or more. The land has a slight slope upward from the road, and I have 3 blocks and 3 separate option agreements. It's looking pretty good, but just need to sort out the underground parking situation. Thank you so much and look forward to hearing a reply.
Underground parking. I'll make one comment about underground parking.
What's that?
It's expensive.
Yep.
And it's not always worth it. So you can increase your yield, or if you like, if we're talking about townhouses, you can increase the number of townhouses on a site if you go underground parking. Because
Does it pay off often though?
not always.
Yep.
No. Let me explain it this way. If you were building at ground level, let's say you're doing 3-bedroom townhouses and you had a double garage. That double garage takes up about 36 square metres of space. If you were to bury it underneath, you'd pick up 36 square metres,
Yep.
which means you could put more townhouses on that site if you buried the car parking under the ground, basement, semi-basement car parking. Now, so you might think, oh, well, if I can get more townhouses on the site, then I'd have to be better off. I could make more money. But I can tell you it's going to cost you a lot more to bury the car parks. And the point is, do you really come out in front by having more townhouses but with basements? And the only way to really answer that is to do a feasibility where you do a feasibility with how many you have above ground, how many you could have below ground. But
you mean above ground, or if you put a car park underground?
Let's say you could get 11 above ground or 15 if you did basement car parking or whatever it is. So you have to do two feasibilities. But when it comes to basement car parks, it does depend on the ground to a fair extent. That's why a good geotechnical test is important, because you never know what's down there. I mean, if it was, is it sandy? Is it clay? But is there rock there? Is there water? Is there rock and water? I've seen sites. Well, I remember doing some apartments once where we hit bluestone, and that is incredibly hard. That's you need a huge rock breaker to break up bluestone.
Did you carry on with that development?
Well, fortunately, it was only in the corner of the basement, so we did get a big rock breaker in, and it cost money. But when you're doing basement car parks, there's all types. Some basement car parks are built all the way to the boundary, and they're expensive because you have to do board piers all around the boundary. You got to have beams in there. It's quite expensive. Sometimes you can do underground car parks that aren't all the way to the boundary, and so you can batter the ground. You've got a block. You've got a waterproof. There's quite a lot in it. It's not unusual for a car park to cost $50,000 to $100,000. $100,000 per car park on a basement.
Really?
Yeah, and on townhouses not too bad, but on apartments sometimes you have to go to a second level, and that can be really expensive. And you've got more chance of hitting water and rock, and even the type of ground can have quite an effect. Less so with townhouses, more so with apartments which are heavy construction. So, look, in terms of what's it going to cost, it's how long's a piece of string, because it very much depends on the design of the basement, whether it's built to boundary, whether it's not built to boundary, whether it's on a slope, whether it's a full cut or a partial cut. I think they said there that the land goes up from up from the road. So that's probably not a full basement. It might be a half cut, which would be a lot cheaper. Cheaper, not lots, but you'd have less digging. There's also some talk about affordable housing there. And I mean that, yes, you can get by with less car parking for affordable housing, but then you say you're saving money on car parks. That might help you with the yield. You might get a few more because you don't have to have as many car parks. But then what about the sale price? Because we're talking affordable housing now, can we really sell it at a price that's going to give us enough profit? So we might be saving on the build, but losing it on the sale price. So it's like everything in property development, it comes down to the numbers. And sometimes we just have to work out and do feasibilities on different scenarios.
Bob, I know heard you talk about it on numerous occasions, but I really picked up then when we got to underground car parking, you were like, oh, they're expensive. And I know that that's something that you've often said. Have you ever had like a fabulous experience or more often than not, harder work?
Well, they are. Back in the 2014, 15, back in those days, we were doing a number of 5-story apartment blocks.
Yeah.
And we did what we call on-grade parking. So the parking was at ground level.
Yeah.
And then the apartments were on top. That was always worked out better than digging a basement and getting those extra few apartments in on ground level.
So you've got to be it would work out that you need higher sales.
Well, sometimes on large apartment blocks,
yep.
there's nothing. You've got to get the parking somehow, and then obviously basement car parking, and in some cases even 2 levels. The second level costs a lot more than the first level, and the first level costs enough anyway. So it's just down to design and costing.
I think,
but then there's about 5-6 different types of basements that you can do as well, and they could cost anything from $900 to well over $2,000 a square metre.
Wow!
Just to build a basement car park currently.
So for the newbie property developers listening to this, you're thinking, oh, well, I won't be doing underground car parks. Everyone's freaking out. But interesting. This is like our live Q&A we have every second Wednesday. We have great conversations on things like this. But anyway, thanks, Bob. That was a great answer to a great question. And thanks for sending that in. So whether I'm summarising it up now, I think we've covered everything. And I think just when it comes to property development and investing, you've just got to go into it with your head screwed on, like everything. And if you're considering any sort of investing, it might even be stocks or what's the other thing that doesn't exist that people invest in?
Futures?
No. Oh, the other thing.
Crypto?
That's it. Yes, that or crypto or whatever your jam is. Just don't go into it just be aware and informed on what you're doing. So if you would like to tell us of your investment good bits or bad bits, jump on over to our Facebook, the Property Developer Secrets and Hacks. Join that and tell us about any experience that you've had with property investing that was good, perhaps. We'll put a post up. You can jump in underneath.
There's plenty of good stories out there.
Oh, for sure. I've had a great story.
Way more than not good.
Yeah, for sure.
10 to 1, 11 to 1, 20 to 1, I don't know.
Yeah, tons. So we would love to catch up with you there on Facebook, but we'll put the link to our Facebook page in the show notes, and we'll look forward to seeing you there. Anyway, thanks, Bob. It's time to wrap up.
Thanks, Hilary.
Yeah, hopefully both of our voices are back to normal.
Hope I haven't caught anything off you.
Oh, God, me too. All right. Well, that's episode 150.
Oh, wow. What a milestone.
What a milestone. Well done to us.
I reckon.
150. That is a lot of podcasting.
It is. It's 3 years solid podcasting.
Is it?
Well, 50 a year, 52 a year.
Holy heck.
We've only missed 1 or 2 weeks in 3 years.
Yeah, I think we've missed 2 podcasts in 3 years.
Yeah.
And I've got a second podcast. And I'm up to episode 35 on that, and I've missed 1, and that was only a pretty personal reason.
Yeah, well, you full on podcasting.
Yeah, I'm a podcaster. So, yeah, if you're into motivation, jump on over to mine, Bounce Back Better. Anyway, I'll put that link to that one too below. Yeah. But that's enough from us today. We will catch you next week. Thanks for listening.
Bye now.
Bye.